In this video, we will explore the plot of a Russian adventure and fantasy movie that has captured the imagination of many. This story focuses on the thrilling adventures of a man and a magical fish. This film is very popular in Russia and promises to be an entertaining experience until the very last moment. Be sure to watch the entire video. The movie begins by showing us the underwater kingdom, where the king of the fish, who wears a magical ring, communicates with his spy, a frog. The king asks about the location of the fish he wishes to marry, but the frog admits it does not know where it is. Which Angé the king, he orders the frog to search through rivers, streams, and ponds. Then we move to a Russian village, where we find the home of a blind blacksmith and his son Ivan, who is awakened by his dog. Ivan is a kind-hearted yet somewhat naive young man. As he leaves home, his blind father insists he learn the blacksmith trade, to which Ivan agrees. His father asks him to catch something to eat, so Ivan takes a bucket and a fishing hook and heads to the river, which is covered in ice. Upon reaching the river, Ivan makes a hole in the ice and lowers his hook. Suddenly bubbles start forming in the water, and surprised Ivan steps back, just as a jet of water ejects a fish directly into his bucket. Ivan, pleased with the ease of the catch, returns home, thinking about the meal he will prepare. But the fish surprisingly speaks to him and asks him not to cook it. Astonished that the fish can talk, Ivan listens as it offers to grant him 3 wishes if he releases it back into the river. Filled with joy, Ivan promises to think about his wishes. As he reflects, unwittingly he expresses his desire to be able to see the whole city without leaving his home. Suddenly, a miraculous event occurs, and his house begins to rise. The fish informs him that his first wish is being fulfilled, leaving Ivan astonished and excited about the possibilities that open up before him. Although Ivan voiced his wish almost thoughtlessly, the fish clarifies that he has officially made a wish. Before he realizes it, Ivan and his forge, as if part of a carriage, move out of his house. The fish explains that since Ivan wanted to explore the city without leaving his forge, the forge accompanies him on his journey. Despite his disbelief and the cold of winter, Ivan murmurs wishes for warmth and greenery. Instantly, the ice disappears, giving way to a warm spring environment that transforms the landscape into an orchard. The fish then informs him that 2 of his wishes have been fulfilled, and he has only 1 left. Ivan, carrying the fish in the bucket, reflects on how he has wasted his wishes on trivial things and regrets not having asked for something more grand. The fish replies that each person asks according to their own view of the world. As they continue their journey, some bandits intercept Ivan with intentions of robbing him, but finding no money, they try to take the fish. Ivan takes advantage of a moment of carelessness to escape with the bucket. The bandits chase him, but with no way out, Ivan decides to release the fish into the river, asking it to stay there where it will be safe. Furious, the bandits hang him upside down from a tree and leave. Soon after, a beautiful young woman approaches and helps him get free. Ivan, noticing a scarf with a fish pattern on her shoulder, realizes that she is the fish transformed into a human. She introduces herself as Yana. Ivan, making sure she cannot escape, takes the scarf and tells her that he still has 1 wish left, which he will use at the right time. Yana, curious, asks about his plans. Ivan reveals that his goal is to marry the daughter of the Russian Tsar. Jana, asking if that will be his 3rd wish, listens as Ivan states that he will try to achieve it on his own. Asking for her support, she agrees to collaborate. And the next scene takes us to the Tsar's palace, where a maid informs Princess Nancy that an ambassador from England is on his way. News that fills her with joy. Princess Nancy had always dreamed of marrying an Englishman, so she dressed with care and promptness. However, King Jar had a deep dislike for the English and did not want his daughter to marry one at all. Meanwhile, the ambassador from England arrived, intending to win the king's approval and ask for his daughter's hand. For this purpose, he gave Princess Nancy an umbrella that filled her with joy. But King Jar disliked all of this and reprimanded the ambassador, saying that the English only came with intentions of looting. The ambassador, trying to change his perception, presented a gift, thinking it would alter his opinion about the English. At that moment, Ivan and Jana arrived at the kingdom. The ambassador was showing the king a curious device that produced music by itself, hiding the fact that there was a man inside the machine who played the music by pressing a button. No one else knew this trick. While the ambassador demonstrated the music, Ivan and Jana observed from behind the walls of the palace. Despite the demonstration, the king was not impressed and communicated that they did not need such a machine. But Nancy was completely in love with the English ambassador and wished to marry him during a moment of affection. The ambassador began kissing Nancy's hand, while the king, confused, didn't know how to convince his daughter otherwise. Just then Ivan burst in running and suggested to the king that it was not necessary to marry the princess to an Englishman, as he would bring a machine that could play music by itself. Upon hearing this, the king was delighted, as he was looking for any excuse to avoid his daughter's marriage. To the Englishman, the king told Ivan that if he managed to get such a device, he could ask for anything he wanted, even asked if he could marry the princess, and the king agreed. The princess, however, was annoyed to hear this, as she wanted to marry the English ambassador and did not like Ivan trying to scare him. But Ivan remained firm in his purpose. The king then ordered that Ivan be given new clothes and shoes for his quest, as Ivan was poor, and he wanted to equip him properly for the task. Ivan, whose feet were dressed only in worn socks, was filled with joy at the king's offer. Upon leaving, he shared the news with Jana. She warned him that, although the musical instrument existed, it was extremely difficult to obtain. When Ivan asked why, Jana explained that the instrument was in the hands of a creature in the dark forest, and that all who had tried to recover it never returned alive. Jana revealed that the instrument had peculiar powers. If it played a cheerful melody, it made people dance non-stop until they fell exhausted and were devoured by the creature. If it played a sad melody, it made people cry until they fell asleep, equally being devoured. Ivan, understanding the danger, decided to take the risk, and along with Jana, prepared a bag of food to undertake the search. As they ventured deeper into the dark forest, overcoming difficult paths, they approached their destination. Upon reaching the forest's threshold, Jana told Ivan that he had to continue alone. As Ivan advanced through the dense forest, he found himself surrounded by skeletons and bones, testimony of those who had attempted this mission before. Suddenly, he heard the voice of the creature asking if he, too, was seeking the musical instrument. Ivan affirmed his intention, to which the creature proposed a challenge. If he could withstand the music of the instrument without losing control, it would be his. The creature asked if he preferred to hear a melody of sadness or joy, and Ivan chose the sad one. Surprisingly, the song had no effect on Ivan, who even began to sing the following lines of the melody. Astonished, the creature inquired how he knew the song and why it did not make him sad. Ivan explained that his mother had sung that song to him every day during his childhood, so it did not affect him. Having lost the challenge, the creature confessed to Ivan that it would starve if it gave up the instrument. With compassion, even offered food from his bag, which delighted the creature. Grateful, it not only agreed to hand over the instrument, but also decided to accompany Ivan on his return. Consider that you see me as a friend on the other side. Near the river, Yana waits for Ivan, sitting peacefully. Suddenly, a messenger from the Fish King, a frog, delivers a message. The Fish King has been searching for her everywhere and wishes for her to come to him to marry immediately. Yana responds firmly, telling him to inform the king that she will never marry him. At that moment, Ivan arrives with his cat and a musical instrument and overhears the conversation between Yana and the frog. Curious, Yana asks him if he finally found that musical instrument. Ivan nods, and shortly after, they both decide to return. On the way back, Ivan mentions to Jana that he understands her rejection of marriage to the Fish King because he fled from there. Jana confirms, saying she does not love him. In the next scene, the action moves to the palace of King Jar, where an ambassador from England, now disguised as an ambassador from Italy, tries to persuade the king to allow the marriage of the prince. With the princess, she recognizes him and is pleased. However, before she can ask for her hand, Ivan arrives with the musical instrument, and at his indication, the cat begins to play joyful melodies, causing everyone in the court, unable to resist, to begin dancing exhaustingly due to the magical music. Eventually, at Ivan's request, the cat stops the music. The king, impressed, congratulates Ivan on the wonderful instrument and decides that both the cat and the instrument should remain in the palace. Ivan, remembering their agreement, asks the king to fulfill his promise to marry his daughter Nancy. To him, the king agrees, but Nancy, cunning and proud, only wishes to marry the English ambassador. To evade marriage with Ivan, she proposes that he undertake a task which, in her opinion, would be impossible to complete, thus hoping to rid herself of him forever. Naively, Ivan accepts the challenge, promising to perform any task. Nancy decides that she will tell him what it is. The next day later, Ivan meets up with Jana, who, seeing him happy, asks if his marriage with the princess is already arranged. Ivan responds that it is not, as Nancy has proposed a challenge. Before agreeing to marry him, she promised to marry me if I could complete one last task. That night, Princess Nancy went to the warehouse to summon the spirit of her malevolent mother. When the spirit appeared, it asked why she had called it at such hours. Nancy confessed that she wanted to assign Ivan a task so difficult that he could never complete it, thus freeing herself from him forever. Her mother suggested a particularly arduous challenge. The next day following the plan, the princess told the ambassador to show the king an incredible machine. This device, upon inserting vegetables, would automatically cut them, and when fruits were added, it produced juice by itself. What nobody knew was that inside the machine, there was a person hidden doing all the work. While everyone thought the machine was operating on its own, the ambassador asked the king if he had anything similar in his kingdom. Before the king could answer, Nancy intervened and asked if Ivan could bring something that would serve the food automatically and then clean up by itself. The king mentioned he had heard of a magical tablecloth that could do that, although he had never seen it. Nancy cunningly proposed to the king that if Ivan managed to bring such a tablecloth, she would marry him under these conditions. Ivan set off with Jana in search of the legendary magical tablecloth. During their journey, Jana explained that the tablecloth was in the possession of two brothers, John and Ron, who had left the city years ago to live in a mountainous region. These brothers had become lazy over time due to the comfort of the tablecloth, which provided them food without effort. As they continued their journey, Ivan and Jana stopped at the house of an elderly couple who, despite their poverty, deeply loved each other. Jana commented that the love between two people should be like that of a needle and thread, where one is incomplete without the other, reflecting the relationship of the elderly couple. Conversing, they passed through beautiful green fields until they reached the mountainous region, where they finally found the brothers, noticeably obese due to the lack of activity, sitting among tall cliffs with the magical tablecloth. The brothers, tired of eating, were about to rest when Ivan approached and asked them for the magical tablecloth. This deeply upset them, and in a fit of anger, they threw a coconut at his head, knocking him unconscious. Jana quickly came to help and suggested to the brothers that they look at their reflection in the water, seeing themselves so changed and resembling animals due to the laziness accumulated over the years. They felt deeply sad and asked Jana for a solution. He advised them to get rid of the magical tablecloth, to leave behind their laziness and start working for their food. The brothers agreed and handed over the tablecloth to Jana, who took it and left with Ivan, who had already regained consciousness. As they returned, Ivan, filled with joy for having obtained the tablecloth, began picking flowers in a garden to take to the princess. Yana revealed to him that Nancy didn't really want to marry him and had only given him that task to get rid of him. Ivan, innocent and kind-hearted, refused to believe it and explained to Yana how he planned to propose to the princess. Ivan's kindness and naivety made Yana fall in love with him, though she decided not to reveal her feelings. Meanwhile, at the palace, the princess and the ambassador were celebrating, thinking that Ivan would never return. However, Ivan triumphantly returned and was enthusiastically received by all the inhabitants of the kingdom, who saw him as a hero. The king, impressed, noted how the people admired and appreciated him. But Nancy was furious, as she never intended to marry Ivan. Desperate, she went back to the warehouse to summon her mother's spirit again and look for another plan to avoid the marriage. Then the wicked mother reveals another risky plan. The next day, in the presence of everyone in court, Jana tells the king that she is willing to marry, but will only do so with her mother's blessing. Therefore, Ivan must venture into the dark world to obtain his mother's permission for the marriage. Upon hearing this, the king understands that his daughter is setting impossible obstacles for Ivan to avoid marriage, as going to the dark world and returning alive is an impossible feat. Both the king and Ivan feel discouraged by this complicated task, but Ivan accepts the challenge. He then turns to Jana, who warns him that going to that place is like entering the mouth of death, as it is a world apart. Ivan asks how he can get there and decides to go alone, but Jana explains that he must first cross a dark forest and a black river full of dangers and fog. The next day, Ivan leaves with Yana for that other world, but first visits his blind father, not knowing if he will return. Hearing Yana's voice, his father, a blacksmith who works with difficulty due to his blindness, expresses his sadness for not having heard his son's voice in days and his inability to search for him. Yana, and Ivan are saddened to see his condition. Ivan regrets having left his father in such conditions and asks for his forgiveness, obtaining his blessing for the journey. Later, Ivan tells Yana that, although he is spoiled 2 of his wishes, he wants the third to be to cure his father's eyes. Yana fulfills this wish, and the father's eyes are restored. As he works in the forge arriving at the river, Ivan reminds Jana that he has fulfilled her 3 wishes and has given her much support, but he does not want to cause her more trouble, so he decides to continue the journey alone. Then he gives her his fisherman's scarf and sets her free. However, Jana responds that she still does not understand that their relationship is like a thread joined to a needle inseparable, and that she cannot leave him alone in difficult times. She asks him to understand that once he succeeds, they can be together. Then Yana decides to accompany him. Although Ivan still does not fully understand the love she feels for him. Without openly expressing her feelings, Yana gets on the boat with him, and together they move along the river. As they venture deeper, they see statues of death messengers everywhere, signaling the beginning of the dark zone. Stopping the boat, they disembark in a valley, where Ivan comments on the strangeness of the place. The guardian of the world approaches and, surprised, asks how they have arrived there. Jana replies that she has come with him, which leaves Ivan astonished. The guardian then reveals that Jana is his daughter, and explains that he forced her to become a fish so that she could learn and experience the world. Jana clarifies that they are there to search for the queen's soul. The guardian tells them that the queen was a cruel and cunning woman who married the king to gain power and oppressed the poor, so her soul is being punished in this world, condemned to eternal hunger. The guardian then makes the queen's soul appear, and in the presence of Jana and Ivan, she initially refuses to give her consent for the marriage. Seeing the situation, Jana's father intervenes, showing the queen food, and explains that her torment will only end if she agrees under pressure. The queen finally grants permission. The next scene shows the palace of King Jar, where Nancy and a diplomat enjoy a feast, while the king watches sadly. Suddenly, the queen's soul appears on a platter, publicly announcing her consent to the marriage, filling the king with joy, although Nancy is perplexed to see that Ivan has completed the difficult task. Meanwhile, in the dark world, Jana thanks her father and returns to the boat with Ivan, ready to go back along the way. She tells Ivan that he has completed the most difficult task of all. "You don't need me anymore, so forget about me. You'll end up marrying the princess anyway," she said with resignation, but Ivan replied, "I can't forget you, and I don't want to." Jana, with a mix of sadness and resignation, reminded him that those who return from that place are destined to lose their memories elsewhere. Nancy, consumed by anger, entered the storage room to destroy the chair, with which she invoked her mother's spirit. Her mother revealed that she had been forced to allow Ivan certain freedoms under coercion, but she confessed that she possessed a secret that could solve all her problems. When asked what it was, her mother explained that Ivan had not acted alone. In his feats, a magical fish had helped him throughout, and in her kingdom, the use of magic was punishable by death. Meanwhile, Ivan and Yana continued their journey down the river. And at dawn, when Ivan woke up, he found his boat on the shore, and all his memories of Yana had disappeared. When he asked who she was, Yana simply replied, "I am just the one who steers the boat." Ivan got off the boat, feeling he was forgetting something important. Upon arriving where Nancy was, Ivan told her that, although he had completed all his tasks, he had fallen in love with someone else, though he could not remember who. Nancy cunningly inquired if he had completed his tasks alone, to which Ivan admitted he had always had magical help, though he could not remember from whom. Upon hearing about the magic, Nancy ordered the soldiers to arrest him, as in her kingdom, this was punishable by death. Ivan was stunned. He couldn't believe that the person for whom he had risked so much would betray him in such a way. The next day, as they were blindfolding him for execution, Yana suddenly arrived and offered her freedom in exchange for Ivan's, giving Nancy a scarf with fish scales, a symbol of her own magic moved. Nancy accepted the deal and cancelled Ivan's execution. After saving Ivan, power and arrogance took over Nancy, who decided to imprison her own father to proclaim herself queen. Once crowned, she confessed to Jana that her first wish had been fulfilled, and now she wished for the Prince of England to propose to her. Thanks to Jana's magic, English soldiers arrived with a marriage proposal from their prince, upon which the English ambassador, a former lover of Nancy, felt betrayed. Nancy, without hesitation, relegated him to cleaning duties in the palace. On the other hand, Ivan wandered, disoriented, through the places he had visited with Jana, unable to remember anything clearly. During a nighttime visit to his father, he encountered John and Ron, who had lost weight from physical exertion. His father reminded him that the last time he had been there with Jonna, and upon seeing a thread and needle in John's hands, all his memories with Jonna returned. Determined to reclaim his love, Ivan, helped by his father and the brothers, broke down the palace doors, confronting Nancy. Ivan demanded Yana's release, threatening to retaliate against the soldiers if she did not comply. Nancy, ever calculating, proposed to Yana to fulfill a third wish, to turn her into a sorceress like herself. Yana fulfilled the wish, but with an unexpected twist. Nancy turned into a fish. Trying to reverse the transformation, Nancy discovered that she could not use magic for her own benefit at that moment. Water from a nearby well began to flow, and the Fish King emerged, mistaking Nancy for Jonna and taking her underwater to marry her. Freed from Nancy, everyone celebrated. Ivan's father was released and reinstated as king, while Ivan and Jonna finally declared their love for each other and decided to live together, thus closing this fantastic tale full of magic and adventures.